Good morning, everyone. I'm Dev Nog, CEO of QueryPal. Before QueryPal, I was the founding CTO at Wavefront. We built real-time analytics for some of the most demanding technical environments on the planet. VMware acquired us, and I spent years helping enterprises figure out how to adopt complex technology without breaking things. That experience taught me something really important. The hardest part of enterprise technology isn't building it, it's getting it approved. And that brings us to why we're here. If you work in a regulated industry, financial services, healthcare, legal, government, you've probably been told it's an impossible triangle when it comes to AI and support. I think we have the slide somewhere here for the triangle. There we go. Okay, perfect.
Sorry.
So here's the impossible triangle: capacity, compliance, correctness. You can have capacity, higher productivity, faster resolution, lower cost, higher deflection. You can have correctness, right answers, nuance, tone. You can have compliance, data privacy, security, governance. But you only have two. You can't have all three. Well, I'm here to tell you it's wrong. The triangle actually is solvable, but it's only solvable if you get the architecture right. Most AI projects, especially today, don't fail because the technology doesn't work. They fail because risk questions surface too late. The demo looks great, the business team gets excited, then it goes to security and sits there for half a year. Sound familiar? Today, Jason and I are going to walk you through how to avoid that trap. Jason Gucher is our head of CS. He's been in CS and CX for 15 years, and he's the one who actually helps our customers get from this sounds interesting to this is live in production.
Yeah, thanks, Dev. Yes, that's right. 15 years and running. And over that time, I have seen a lot of solutions that have come into this space and made the claim that they are going to revolutionize customer support. And for those that are on here, you probably know that doesn't always happen. Honestly, it's actually not a problem with the technology that they're offering. It's not that it's lacking in any sort of way. That's actually the easy part. The hard part is getting organizational alignment on the new tech that you want to adopt and add into your organization, right? It's getting buy-in and acceptance from security teams, compliance, or even your own team. And that's what we're going to focus on today.
So here's our agenda for today. We're going to cover where AI adoption actually stands in regulated industries. It's happening, but carefully. Why architecture matters more than features. And we're going to talk about the 4 pillars of self-hosted AI. This is the framework that changes the whole conversation with your security team. We're going to talk about what agentic AI can and cannot do. Jason's going to get very specific here. We're going to have a practical playbook for getting from pilot to production, and then we're going to open up for Q&A. Let's dive in. So let's start with reality. AI in customer support isn't coming, it's here. Gartner says 77% of support leaders feel pressure from executives to deploy AI. Cisco predicts that AI will handle 68% of CS interactions by 2028. It's already happening. It's not the first thing anymore. But what's important and different about regulated industries is that the adoption pattern is different. In tech, in e-commerce, companies are racing to automate everything. Full autonomy, AI handles the whole interaction. But in regulated industries, the smart firms are taking a different approach. They're focusing on assisted workflows, not autonomous ones. Research and summarization, draft responses for agent review, internal knowledge access, triage and routing. Support and ops teams are leading adoption, not front office, because that's where you get the quick wins without stepping on regulatory landmines.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. The way that Dev describes regulated industries, pretty much spot on, and what we see from most of our successful companies and customers, right? The goal of these regulated industry customers, it's not necessarily to replace the support agents. Rather, they're trying to help their agents be more efficient, right? They want them to help be more faster, more consistent. It's what we often refer to as the co-pilot model. It's something that we're going to talk about later on during this webinar, right? It's where the AI does the heavy lifting up front. It researches the inquiry, it drafts the appropriate response, and then it uses a human in the loop approach, right? It allows the agents to review, adjust if necessary, and then send it out to the customer. In a regulated industry, this flow isn't actually a limitation. It's what makes it all approvable, to be honest with you. And frankly, the approach isn't just a nice to have. The human in the loop flow is really becoming a regulatory expectation. The FCA in the UK, the GAO here in the US, they're all emphasizing the importance of human oversight for AI systems. So if you approach it that way from the beginning, then you're already setting yourself up for success.
Yeah, Jason and I have been in AI for about 9 years now, going back to VMware. And the question has shifted. Back then, even 5 years ago, the question was, should we use AI? That debate is over. The question now is, how do we use AI without introducing new risks? And that's where most vendors and most internal AI initiatives actually fail. They focus on the features, the cool stuff in the demo, but they don't address the fundamental question that your security and compliance teams are going to ask, which brings us to architecture. So here's something I learned at Wavefront. When you're selling to enterprises with serious security requirements, features don't close deals. Architecture closes deals. Your security team doesn't care that AI can draft responses 40% faster. They care about, where does our data go? Who can access it? Can we audit what the AI did? What happens if the vendor gets breached? If you can't answer those questions, your project will stall in security review. I've seen it happen dozens of times. So let's talk about the 4 deployment models we encounter in the market here in support AI. So the first one on the top left here is vendor SaaS. This is the most common by far. Everything runs in the vendor's cloud. You grant them access to all of your systems. Now it's the fastest deployment, right? Minimum operations overhead, but all of your data, client PII, PHI, financial data, support conversations all go to their environment. For regulated industries, this is often a non-starter. But most AI support vendors, this is their only option. This is all they do. So a lot of vendors will say, let's go for a hybrid SaaS model, right? You'll push back and say, let's actually have some of the knowledge stay on your side, but we'll process it in our cloud. But the problem is you still have that trust boundary out there in the vendor's cloud, right? Data still flows out, and the complex workflows hit ceilings because the AI can't safely access everything that your agents can access. So when people say hybrid, they usually mean some separation of the data inside versus what goes to the cloud, which can work for lighter use cases for simple tier one questions. But for complex, high context support, it actually falls quite short. At the top right here is self-hosted. This is where the support AI runs entirely in your environment, your cloud, your control. Orchestration, retrieval workflows, all of it lives where your data already lives, behind your existing perimeter. Now, the pros here are that you have full control. The cleanest approvals, AI operates under your existing audit policies and access controls. Obviously, the con is higher effort. You have to manage the infrastructure yourself. On the bottom right here is managed services. So here you actually have the cloud yourself. It's your infra, but the vendor manages in your cloud tenant, right? So you get the full control without the operational overhead. So this is often the sweet spot for smaller companies and regulated industries. Your security team is happy because the data doesn't move, and your ops team is happy because they don't have to worry about managing Kubernetes clusters. But here's the core insight. If AI can't safely access the same information, the same systems that your existing agents use, it cannot help with complex issues, right? It's basically blind to all the context that they're going to have. This is why architecture matters more than features. A vendor can have the most amazing, sophisticated AI in the world, but if it can only see a subset of your data because everything else is too sensitive to send to the cloud, it's going to give you low quality answers that are not going to clear the hurdle. Now, let me walk you through the framework that changes how security teams think about this. The 4 pillars. When we talk to security compliance teams, they're not evaluating AI vendors on features. They're evaluating on risk. And that risk conversation comes down to 4 pillars. This is probably the most important part of the whole presentation here. I want you to remember these 4 words: privacy, sovereignty, perimeter, and future proofing. If you can address all 4, you'll get approved. If not, you'll spend half a year in review purgatory and then have to start off again. Okay, first pillar here on the top left is data privacy. Your promise to users. You told your clients, whether financial clients, patients, legal clients, that their data is protected. It's not just a nice thing to say, it's often an obligation.
Yeah, this is quite literally the first thing that comes up in every single conversation we have with prospects in regulated industries, right? They come to us with the same general question of, we promised our clients that the data is going to stay with us. So how do we actually use AI in some meaningful way without breaking that promise? The QueryPal response is always very clear on this, right? You run the AI where the data already lives. So therefore, you're not really breaking any promises. You're just using better tools internally.
That's right. Second pillar here at the top right is data sovereignty. This is about government protection of user data. So your users are also citizens, perhaps of a state, a province, or a country with another layer of legal protections. That might be GDPR in Europe, data residency. There's state privacy laws here in California, Virginia, and Colorado. There's sector regulations like GLBA and HIPAA. And if your AI processes data in their cloud, you have to trace exactly where that data goes, what data center, what country, what sub-processors. And here's the thing, the EU AI Act just went into enforcement, and penalties go up to 35 million euros or 7% of global revenue. It's not just theoretical anymore. And we're getting back to the third pillar here. Again, bottom left here, security perimeter. This is about not extending your attack surface to vendors that you don't control. So, your security team inside of your organization has spent years, maybe decades, building controls, access policies, monitoring, incident response, penetration testing. They know their environment inside out. Every SaaS vendor you add is an extension of that perimeter. It's another integration to secure, another vendor to assess, another potential point of breach. The GAO put out a report in May highlighting concerns about financial institutions' reliance on third party AI service providers. It's on regulators' radar right now. When AI runs in your environment, it operates under your existing controls. Your security team doesn't have to worry about learning how some new vendor processes data, where it actually goes. It's all inside of like your existing house with all the policies and compliance you have right now. The AI is just another part of that workload in that environment that they already manage.
Exactly right. The security teams that we talk to, they love this framing, right? We were just talking with a CISO the other day, and they were telling us how, for them in particular, we're the first AI vendor that's made their job easier instead of harder. And it's not that we're doing anything crazy. It's just because we aren't asking them to extend the trust to us, right? We're asking them to use the controls they already have in place.
And the fourth pillar at the bottom right here is future proofing. So this is one that actually lands the hardest with leadership. So a prediction that I'm very confident in making is that privacy, sovereignty, compliance is only going to get stricter, is only going to get more complex over time. We're still in the early stages of understanding how AI is going to interact with privacy and security and sovereignty. If you look at just the last year, right? The EU AI Act enforcement began. We had a moratorium on state AI laws. States keep legislating and adding more layers on top of the national laws. We have, multiple state attorneys taking enforcement actions on AI. If you build your AI capability on a vendor SaaS today, and the regulatory landscape shifts, what happens? You might have to rip and replace, start from scratch with all that time and money down the drain. Now, if AI runs in your environment, you stay ahead, you adapt. You don't have to start over again. Your investment is protected.
Yeah, and honestly, this is the argument that gets executive buy-in when it comes to us, right? It's not just about what's compliant today. It's about not having to redo that work 2 years from now when the next regulation drops. And honestly, like that's where we see a lot of urgency right now. Teams are realizing that the decisions they make today on their AI architecture is really what determines how flexible they can be tomorrow.
That's right. So these are the four pillars. Again, the most important part of the whole presentation is what you're seeing right here: privacy, sovereignty, the perimeter, and future proofing. When you can address all four, the whole conversation changes with your security team. It stops being convince me this is safe and starts being let's figure out how to get this done. Now let's hand it over to Jason to talk about what agentic AI can actually do and what it can't do in practice.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Dev. So yeah, let's get practical, right? What is agentic AI and regulated support really? Yeah, so let me start off by saying, what it's not, right? It's not a chatbot. Chatbots require agents to seek out answers, and they're glorified keyword matchers. They don't work here. It's also not an autopilot bot. Like this is very, very important here. We're not talking about AI that makes decisions for your clients or moves money or approves transactions. In regulated industries, that's a non-starter, quite obviously. It goes back to that co-pilot model that I had previously used, right? It's a good example of this. It's like the senior associate that's been in your organization for 10 years and just knows where everything is, right? So what can Copilot actually do? So when we talk about this Copilot model, right? Copilots can research across systems, right? They can pull context from your CRM. They can look at your knowledge base. They can go through your ticketing history. They can review internal docs, right? With all of that information at hand, a Copilot can reason through exceptions. It's not just pattern matching, but it's being able to look at the actual inquiry from the customer and being able to walk through and actually think through it and say, this case is different because of X, Y, and Z. It can draft accurate responses. I emphasize accuracy here, right? It writes something that your agents can review, that they can adjust, and that they can send. And it has the format of that email grounded in how your agents have previously engaged with customers. And a really good point here is that copilots can surface the next steps, right? By helping your teams understand that given the current situation at hand, these are the typical next steps that you will need to follow to properly resolve this inquiry. Now, what a copilot can't do and what it honestly shouldn't do It should not make regulated decisions, right? Suitability determinations, medical advice, legal conclusions. You can't have that in regulated industries, right? So you don't want Copilot to do that. You also don't want copilots to execute irreversible actions, right? Like moving money or closing accounts or approving transactions. Um, and most importantly, kind of what we've already been talking about, is you can't have it replace human judgment, right? There still needs to be a human in the loop that is reviewing the information provided by the AI, that's making decisions on that knowledge, and then sending out that information on their own terms. So what's a good example of this, right? Let's take like a wealth management client, right? They email in and they say, hey, what's going on? It looks like my transfer is delayed, right? Simple question, seems pretty straightforward. Where's their money? Anybody that has done support roles, right, has been that first line of defense when it comes to customers. They understand that when you look at that question, it's not as simple as it looks, right? Because there are several steps that are required in order to resolve that type of inquiry, right? So, for example, that support agent might need to go look at custodial systems for transfer statuses. And using that knowledge, they might also need to cross-reference that with CRM notes to make sure that there's no flag on the account to explain why that transfer hasn't been completed. They might need to look at the original transfer docs themselves and look at the exact details from it and make sure that it actually looks right. They might need to look at the client's KYC information and make sure that it's current. It might be that there's a compliance hold, so they need to go into a different system and check that. It's 5 different systems that they have to jump between. And that honestly is a flow that traditionally takes 15 to 20 minutes of just pure research before they even get to writing the email. And again, for anybody that has been in a support role, that 15, 20 minutes of research is 15, 20 minutes of time that your client is waiting for an answer and getting more frustrated. Now, with agentic AI, that research happens in seconds, right? That's the whole point. The AI pulls the context from all 5 systems. It synthesizes it identifies based on all of the knowledge that it gets that it's a delay because of a documentation mismatch, and drafts a response explaining the situation and what needs to happen next, right? The agent is able to, again, within seconds, review that, confirm its accuracy, perhaps adjust the tone if desired, and then send it back to the customer, right? It's got that human in the loop flow. And we've now gone from a 20-minute turnaround to 2 minutes. And that's honestly the biggest value here, right? Like that's the difference between your simple tier 1 automations and your tier 2, 3, like tier 2, tier 3 resolutions, right? Anyone can automate password resets. That's a very common thing. Anybody can do that. The real value of agentic AI is when it can be used in complex workflows, right? The ones that require cross-system context and actual reasoning, and by the way, like I've seen this in past organizations that I've worked in, right? Those tier 2, tier 3 complex tickets, they may not actually be the majority of your ticket volume, right? It might actually be a minority. But I think what anybody can agree with is that those complex tickets are the ones that take up the most agent time. They're the ones that require the most follow-ups from the support agent. It's where most of your clients' frustrations stem from. And honestly, it's where the most risk comes into play because that's where mistakes happen. Uh, Generic chatbots, they fail at this completely. They can't see across systems. They can't reason through exceptions. And what they eventually end up doing is they just punt to a human and add friction. Agentic AI doesn't punt. It does the actual work. And, before I allow you to jump in here, one more thing I'll just quickly note on this, and this matters for anybody that is thinking about change management. It's a common misnomer. Your support agents don't hate AI, right? Again, it's incorrect. They hate bad AI, right? They don't like AI that makes them look stupid in front of their clients. They hate suggestions that are obviously wrong. Uh, when AI actually helps, when it does the research that they were going to do anyway, when it drafts something that is very useful and is written in a way that they would write it, and it just does it faster, support agents love that. At one of our largest customers, we hit a 90% agent approval rate on the AI drafted responses that we created. And those were agents that, frankly, coming into the trial and working with QueryPal, were skeptical, right? They were very skeptical going in on that. And that's honestly what happens when AI is actually good. When it has access to the context that it needs, that's when it gets good, right? When it has access to what your support agents have access to, that's when it provides the real value, which brings us back to architecture.
That's right. And just to underscore Jason's point, going back to the 4 pillars, right? Privacy, sovereignty, perimeter, future proofing. This is why they matter so much for quality, not just compliance, because if your AI can only see a subset of your data because everything else is too sensitive to send to a cloud, it's going to give you that subset quality answers, right? So like taking your agent and blinding them from half of what they have to see to answer a question. And then your agents will actually learn not to trust it. They'll see like a substandard answer and think this is just a bad AI, right? And then what's the point? The whole pilot's going to fail.
Yeah, exactly. So that said, you're bought in now. The architecture and use cases make sense. So how do you actually get this done practically? So Dev, do you want to walk through the playbook?
Sure. Okay, here we're going to talk about how firms actually get AI approved and deployed. And this is based on what we've seen work in a bunch of different places and what we've seen fail. There are 4 steps, and the order actually matters. So the first step here on the top left is to start assistive, right? Start with assistive use cases, not autonomous, not customer facing, agent only tools at first, meaning draft responses for agent review, internal research and summarization, knowledge retrieval, ticket triage, and routing. So why start here with assistive first, right? Because first of all, the approval is easier, right? You're not putting AI in front of customers. You're not letting the AI make decisions. You're giving your agents better tools. But second, you're building trust the whole way through. Your agents learn to understand and trust the AI, right? Your compliance team sees it working without problems. And when you're ready to expand, you have a track record.
Yeah. And frankly, this mirrors how every enterprise tech has gotten adopted, right? It's very clearly, right? CRMs didn't start with full automation. Workflow tools don't start with autonomous processes. Like, you start narrow, you prove the value, and then you expand. What we have seen, as we've worked with customers, the firms that try to boil the ocean, i.e., like, we're going to automate everything, those are the ones that actually get stuck in that 18-month pilot that never actually goes live.
That's right. The second step right here on the left is to frame AI as decision support, not decision making. Very, very important. It's partly about how you position it internally for your team, but also about how you build it. You should emphasize to everyone involved, all your stakeholders, right? Human review on every single customer facing output, audit logs for everything that the AI does, and explainability. You can see why the AI suggested, what it interpreted the question as, what it retrieved, and how it processed everything. And the phrase that I use is that, AI helps our teams prepare better responses, but the final decisions remain human. And that framing actually matters for regulators too. The FCA, the SEC, the state AGs, they're all emphasizing human oversight. If you build that way from day one, you're aligned with where regulation is going.
Yeah, and just to speak for a support agent, this is exactly how they want it, anyways, right? They don't want AI sending things on their behalf. That's not where they want to see AI adopted at today. What they want AI to do is the grunt work, right? They want to do the grunt work, find the information, write the information, get it up there so that they can really focus on the judgment calls.
Third bullet here is define the data flow ground rules. Decide early on where the data can and cannot flow. So this is where a lot of projects stall. They get deep into a pilot, several months into a pilot, and then someone asks, wait, what data is going where? And then no one has a good answer. So before you select a vendor, before you start a pilot, you have to sit down with security and compliance and answer 3 questions. What data stays inside of our environment, full stop? What data can be summarized or referenced but not copied? And what data should never leave, period? Document it first, get sign off before you start the pilot, and then evaluate vendors against that framework, not the other way around.
Easily the single biggest predictor of whether a project moves fast or slow. The teams that do this homework up front, right? They end up sailing through security review. The teams that figure it out as they go, those are the ones that eventually get stuck. And honestly, just in the larger picture, this is a valuable exercise even if you never buy an AI tool. Like knowing your data boundaries is just good hygiene.
That's right. Step 4, pilot early and often. Look for workflows that are painful, the ones that agents hate doing, frequent, high volume enough to see the impact, to understand how the AI is actually doing, and well understood. You know what good looks like, right? It's not like a corner case off there on the side. These are your best pilot candidates, especially for this market. And it's not because they're easy, but because the ROI is obvious. If you can show, this workflow took 20 or 30 minutes, now it takes 5. That's a story that resonates with your CXOs very easily. And you should avoid the temptation to pilot just on easy stuff to get a quick win. Automating password resets doesn't prove anything. Everyone can do that. As Jason mentioned before, you got to prove you can handle the hard stuff.
Yeah, exactly. At the end of this webinar, we'll mention some no obligation ways that we can actually help identify those workflows. But the principle in general is quite universal, right? Start where the pain is real, where you are experiencing pain, not just for your support agents, but for your customers, and focus on the outcomes that are measurable.
Okay, measuring success, very important. So one more thing on the playbook, how do you know it's working, right? So there's the obvious metrics, response time, resolution time, agent effort, productivity. But the less obvious metrics that matter more in regulated industries, right? Consistency. Are your responses uniform across agents and regions? Auditability. Can you trace what happened and why? Error rate. Are you reducing escalation due to incorrect or incomplete responses? And then, of course, agent confidence. Do your people actually trust the tool? Do they approve it? ROI in regulated support isn't just about cost savings, it's about risk reduction and consistency. Sometimes avoiding one compliance incident pays for the whole investment. So, next steps here, 2 ways that we can help. We've covered a ton of ground across the webinar here, but let me leave you with these 2 ways to continue the conversation, both completely optional, obviously no obligation. The first here on the left is for operational leaders. If you're thinking about ROI and where AI could actually help, it's called a support ticket ROI assessment. So basically, we take a small sample of support tickets from your system, anonymized, no PI required. We analyze them and come back with, which workflows are high effort and repeatable, repetitive, or frequent, good candidates for AI, which ones are exception heavy or research intensive, where agentic AI especially shines, directional estimates of time savings and cost impact, and then clear guidance on where to start. We're not asking for production access, we're not asking for client PI or PHI. There's no commitment to proceed past that. It's just diagnostic. The second path on the right side here is for technical and risk leaders. If you're thinking about architecture and approval, it's called an architecture and risk readiness review. It's a working session with platform, IT security, focused on what deployment model makes the most sense for your firm, data boundaries, access patterns. It's not meant to be a technical deep dive into our code. It's not a demo unless you want one. And again, no commitment.
Yeah. And on that ticket ROI assessment, we find that a lot of customers get immense value from these, right? It helps them really understand how their customers are engaging with them. And I'll just quickly add on this. These are conversations first and foremost, right? Not pitches. My team runs these. Our goal is to help you think through whether agentic AI actually makes sense for your situation. Quite honestly, sometimes the answer is not yet. Sometimes it's not for this particular use case. And for us, like that's completely fine. We'd rather be useful than pushy. So if you're interested in either one of these, just drop your info in the chat, or you can reach out after the webinar. We definitely follow up.
So the practical takeaway from today is to start small, very small in scope. Keep the humans in control and choose architectures that fit your risk model. And if you go back to the 4 pillars, right? Privacy, sovereignty, perimeter, future proofing, you'll have the framework to evaluate any AI vendor, including us. AI has caused, a lot of, I'd say, anxiety over the last year, especially in our market. But it doesn't have to be anxiety inducing. With the right approach, it really is genuinely useful. And in regulated industries, the right approach means getting the architecture right from day one. Thanks for joining us. Let's open up for questions.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Well, while we wait for a couple of questions, I'll just quickly note from our side, when we work with our customers, one of the things that we do hear often is, what if we're already working with a support platform, things like Zendesk or Salesforce or Freshdesk. What do we do with those? So just so you know, we do integrate with all of those platforms. We work directly in those platforms. It's one of the pillars of how QueryPal works. We believe that your support agents shouldn't have to be taken out of their typical workflow. So that's why we work directly in the help desks. It's right where they are currently interacting with customers. All they do is open up a new ticket or case that's inside that help desk, and they see all of that work already done by the agentic AI copilot from QueryPal.
I'll cover another question that we hear all the time, which is about hallucinations. So I think, everyone who's used ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini has had the experience of seeing something that you knew was not true, that was thought up by the model and completely does not match reality. So the question is like, how does that happen to affect, support AI? What happens with, AI models inside of our world? How do you ensure accuracy? Well, the first thing is that our AI is actually grounded not just in the documentation, the knowledge base, right, but also in the ticket history. So it looks back at often like months or years of past tickets, understand what actually is the tone, the approach, the empathy of your agents right now. How do they see things? How do they interpret questions? And how do they look for answers in the docs? So we have a lot of essentially customer like kind of insights to mine in the past, but also agent insights. A lot of tribal knowledge makes it only into tickets, not into the knowledge bases. We're actually able to pull that out and bring that to bear to minimize hallucinations as well.
Yeah, very good points, right? Honestly, I think, there's a lot of good information we could cover here. I think we do hear a lot from our customers on, what types of ticket volume, really makes sense for this. We typically see the best ROI with teams that are handling 500 plus tickets per month based on that complexity side of the world, right? Volume can be much higher, but specifically on those complex tickets, because again, that's where agentic AI and Corpo really tend to shine, is when we can jump across multiple systems, right? So if you're dealing with, 500 plus high tier 2, tier 3 style tickets, that can really justify the volume or the investment, even in a smaller volume, frankly, right? It just depends on how much effort it actually requires your agents to get to the proper resolution and being able to, you know, determine that this is the right fit for it, right? That's why we really, push for that ROI assessment to help clarify for our customers.
Awesome. Well, we could keep going. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you for all the questions. Remember, privacy, sovereignty, perimeter, future proofing. Like those are the four watchwords here of support AI. If you can address those four pillars, you can adopt AI without anxiety. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.